Why is it that this painting has become arguably the most famous painting in the world? For all of the treasures of the Louvre Museum, down every corridor, around every corner, there's a sign that points you in the direction of one single work, like it's the Holy Grail. And when you find it, it's smaller than you thought, darker than you thought, recessed into a wall and covered with a thick layer of bulletproof glass. And if you can work your way up through the crowd to get to the front, do you know what you do? You take a picture. But why? Do we even know? Why is it that this painting, it's a portrait of an unknown woman, a Florentine's merchant's wife, has become arguably the most famous painting in the world, adored by everyone who comes to see it, and reconsidered by artists again and again over the course of centuries? I can tell you it's not because of some of the more far out theories, including the one that suggests it's actually a portrait by Leonardo of himself, dressed as a woman. No, in order to understand the genius of the Mona Lisa, we need to put it into the context of 15th century Florentine portraiture. You know, the convention of the portrait, of depicting real human figures, the earliest convention begins with the profile portrait. Think about the kind of portraits that you see on coins in your pocket or on medals. It was the easiest way to represent the likeness of a person. Now, at the very beginning of the Renaissance, in the early 15th century, artists began to experiment with what we call the three-quarter view. In other words, instead of posing like this, artists would pose their figures with more of one side of the face showing than the other, at an angle to the picture plane, which allowed the sitter in the picture to make eye contact with the viewer. Now, initially, this was only done for male portraits, and female portraits kept this traditional profile pose, which was sort of fitting considering their status in society. They became sort of like virtuous, decorous pieces of property. So the focus was not on who they were, but on what they possessed. All of the women are wearing beautiful jewelry and elaborate clothing. And the background is usually just treated as a plain blue neutral sky or as a very small box-like domestic interior. I can blow up one of these pictures for you. And this is a painting of a woman named Giovanna Tornabuoni by Domenico Ghirlandaio. Now, Ghirlandaio's picture perfectly fits this mode. She's in pure profile. She doesn't engage us. There's an incredible emphasis on her possessions, like her beautiful jewelry and her garments, which were decorated with pearls as a symbol of her purity. Now, if we consider this alongside the Mona Lisa, it's interesting to see that these works are only separated by about 15 years, but they are worlds apart. The Mona Lisa no longer sits in profile. She turns her face outward to engage us. And the pose is quite dynamic. You'll notice she's not just got her body turned towards us, but that her arms and her chest and her face are all at slightly different angles, like she's rotating on her own axis. She's got an expression on her face that matches that sense of movement and makes us think about her interior rather than her external appearance. And in keeping with that, you'll notice that she's not wearing any jewelry, even though we can see her hands, and her clothes are quite simple. Replacing that box-like domestic setting, we've got this deep landscape filled with waterways and rock formation and atmosphere and perspective. In other words, it was genius.